Christ is the icon of humanity, of mankind itself.
The very fact that you and I are talking now, however many centuries later, however many millennia later, about the person of Christ, why is that?
Christianity recognizes the free will made in the image of God. God doesn't force you.
This in itself is an act of ultimate humility, which boggles the mind. On every level, on every aspect, you must first become humble.
This brings us into the understanding of what's don't practice humility, only whose.
Right.
And
Correct.
Christ is the icon of humanity, of mankind itself, of which we are trying to strive towards. And so this is a perfect segue to get into Christ as
Yes.
the icon, Christ, and then his humility. And so maybe you can take off and branch into the icon of Christ, who humility as a personal act.
Yes. The very fact that you and I are talking now, however many centuries later, however many millennia later, about the person of Christ, the fact that we are even still being initiated, longing to enter deeper into that mystery.
Right.
Why is that? What is that, right? Well, that phenomena is only possible because of the absolute humility of Christ. Because if Christ is to reveal himself in all his fullness and glory, you and I would be vaporized,
right?
Not just metaphorically, like literally, right?
Right.
God condescending himself and becoming man. God condescending himself and allowing the means for us as his creation to enter into contemplation, to enter into experience. I mean, this is theosis, right? Entering into this relationship in which we are able to be transformed. This is only possible through his humility. And this is also why, kind of, if I could step back, getting back to, we are walking into the church for the first time, right? And so I brought up what someone encounters first and foremost, it would be the icons, right? Well, what they would experience next is another kind of icon, which is human beings venerating.
Oh, yes.
Human beings, making matanyas or bows, sometimes making prostrations, right? That is another aspect of someone who's not initiated encountering the humility of Christ, right? They're encountering the humility of Christ because, again, they're watching people, and in this is our context, right? North America, Americans, who knows what we've been doing this week. You're watching just people, normal people that you would see at Target or wherever, making odd gestures that communicate inherently humility. Making a bow. What is that about? Where else do you see someone making a bow in our context in North America? Tell me.
Politics, maybe? I don't know.
Like maybe, but that's only if you're seeing one of our proud,
right? Exactly,
Western,
it's the opposite form,
right? The opposite, going somewhere else to a country that's much older, and that country and culture who's being much older, showing some sort of traditional, demonstration of humility, but you don't see it in our context,
right? No.
So what happens is you realize that people are at least attempting to encounter someone, right? And it's first and foremost before they would hear a prayer, right? Because even if they hear chanting, even if they hear, quote unquote, the music of the church, the choir, they're not deciphering what it is.
Right.
They are visually deciphering these bows these people are making. It's being communicated on a deep level, imperceptibly, humility. Right. Well, how do we know this? We know this because we're the people of God. Right. And as the people of God, we are entering into worship of him in the way that he has taught us. Right. Be holy as my Father in heaven is holy. Right. So in order for us to really start talking about the humility of Christ, the person of Christ, the icon of Christ, we have to understand that first and foremost, he is holy. That first and foremost, the need for that humility. Christ demonstrates it for us out of love for us because he knows there's no other way for us to approach him.
Right.
Not because, again, this is why he's not Zeus, right? Not because he's like, how dare you come to me like this? I'm going to zap you. But out of real real condescending, out of a love, out of a healthy, if I could use this term, forgive me if I'm wrong in my definition, out of an honest, healthy paternalism. He's like, the only way for you to approach me is through humility because of who I am and what I am. So let me teach you. Learn of me because I am meek and lowly of heart, right? Do this, and in doing that, then you can approach me. Then we can have this communion that I so desire. But in order for this to happen, you must follow my way. There is no other way, right? Not because I'm obstinate, not because, my way or the highway, but because I am uncreated alone. I alone am uncreated. And so because of that, in order for you to enter into proximity to me on every level, on every aspect, ontologically, you must first become humble.
Yeah. No, and we mentioned this privately, how this, I just before the stream, preparing for it, I did some search on humble gods, humble deities. Well, it's a pretty short list. You start going through there aren't many, and so it's just Christ, and then you look at the ancient gods, and it's Zeus, it's the god of thunder, it's the god of lightning, or it's Poseidon, the god of the oceans. It's in a way these sort of prideful, and we understand them as maybe embodiments of emotions or psychological process or whatever pagan, however you want to define the pagan deities and how they express themselves, but at the same time, the gods themselves are prideful of the things that they somehow have dominion over, and that's then their identity. The identity is the power that they have, and there is no then place for, you look in the ancient pantheons, there is no place for the humble God, and that humility through the lowliness. Somehow we were elevated, but that's exactly what we see with Christ as he demonstrates how we approach him. He's also demonstrating how he's approaching the Father. I mean, it's just this continual reciprocal feedback, and that's where he is the icon of how we then ingratiate ourselves with the divine, how we approach divinity. You look at the ancient world, and it's Caesar, it's burning incense to the emperor, it's human sacrifice, it's animal sacrifice. And then we see again in the humility of Christ, he's ending these processes. He's ending human sacrifice. He's ending animal sacrifice. He's ending the scapegoating. It's now on us. And so it's funny how then humility brings all these things together and is really what, in my mind, you start to look at there's other solar deities. People want to talk about the solar symbolism of Christ. But there is no humility. There is no humble God. Christ is the humble God.
Right. Forgive me. I want to, again, forgive me for all the anecdotal experiences, I share, but it's, I think, getting back to this place of where people are actually at, right? Because that's one of my that's something that's always on my heart is reaching people where they're at. And then from there, they can build up and they can get into the vast expanses of just the profundity of our faith. But let's start small, right? Metropolitan Anthony Bloom says something, and I remember saying this to my older son, and it blew him away. He didn't really know what to do with it, but struggling with his faith, and I explained to him, quoting Metropolitan Anthony Bloom, I said, God is powerless. Before you, in this sense. And he was like, what do you mean? I thought God was all powerful. And I said, oh, he is. But he's powerless in the sense of he doesn't force you.
Yes. Oh, this is a great point.
He won't force you.
Right.
Now let me stack this over here and let's build off of this, right?
Yes.
I think about this all the time, right? All the time. I'm so humbled, no pun intended. I'm so humbled to be a priest. I'm unworthy, truly. And I mean that with every fiber of my being. And the fact that my life revolves around the holy things. And it's never lost on me that when I'm looking at the Holy Eucharist in the proskymedia, right? And then and even during the liturgy of the Naphra, looking at God. Let's think about something, right? Us who are initiated, let's think about something. We experience him as God. He reveals himself to us truly as God, truly. Not as wheat and not as grapes. How does he present himself to us? As bread and wine. In order for there to even be bread and wine, he needs us. We don't offer wheat and grapes. he's commanded us to offer bread and wine. Bread and wine is fundamentally a synergistic act. Right. We cannot bring about wheat in of ourselves. That alone is God's. But God calls us to take the wheat and it must die and then bring forth bread. The grapes must be fermented and the process of making wine. That's a synergistic act. Yeah. Do you see where I'm going with this?
It's a great
that
point.
in itself is humility.
Yeah.
Even in how he's chosen to reveal himself in his fullness.
Right.
This in itself is an act of ultimate humility, which boggles the mind.
Yeah, no, and I love that example you just had with the bread and the wine and the necessity for us in a way to participate in this process, that the way that Christianity recognizes the free will made in the image of God, God doesn't force you.
That's right.
And so in a way, then God then only provides humility as the way out. But he allows you to go through your pride. He allows you to do all these things. You look at Neoplatonism or all these Platonic forms of theology, and God he really only loves himself. That God emanates from himself out into the world, and then everything's going to come back to him. And so God really only loves himself. In the Trinity, we see a God that's three persons, one essence, a God that can love the other. And he loves us as creation in the sense that he only wants us to truly love him, which then requires free will, which requires us to then submit. But unlike the king, unlike Caesar, he doesn't force us to submit. We have to come to our own humility.